The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 221.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart, Headen.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series of Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the fifth Doctor story, Arc of Infinity. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
It's too bad this isn't episode 221B. That would be a lot of fun, but then we'd have to do Sherlock Holmes. So first up, before we get started, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should be sure to hit the bell to get notifications. So, as I said, we're talking about the fifth Doctor story, the Arc of Infinity. This is, it was in 4 episodes, and it is the first serial story of the second season for the fifth Doctor. It's the 20th season overall, which is interesting. So, is there a 20th season special that they do in this? Do you know in this season?
Yes, yeah, the 5 Doctors. Okay,
so we'll be getting to that one. And he's joined again by Tegan and Nyssa, although Tegan doesn't come back for a bit. But let me give you the recap of what this episode is. This is from the TARDIS wiki. Omega, or as Americans say, Omega, an ancient Time Lord made of pure antimatter, once defeated by the Doctor, is plotting to cross over into this dimension by bonding with the Doctor. Meanwhile, the disappearance of a man in Amsterdam piques the curiosity of his cousin Tegan, who previously left the Doctor at Heathrow Airport and now finds herself at Omega's mercy. Fearing total destruction from the collision of matter and antimatter, the Time Lords recall the Doctor to Gallifrey to undertake the only viable solution, executing him, which it seems like that we could have thought of some other things we could do, but so filmed on location in Amsterdam, which is interesting. Part of it, anyway.
Very mildly, maybe.
Yeah, well, the BBC must have got a little bit of money, or they had another project in Amsterdam. Say, hey, let's let the Doctor Who crew come over with us and film a few minutes.
It was John Nathan Turner really wanted to do a foreign shoot, and so they did Amsterdam, but I don't think it's very effectively used. Now, your mileage may vary. Amsterdam may look very different and exotic to you, but to me, it's like, okay, they're running around a European city. That's what they always do.
Yeah.
So the big baddie in this one is a guy named Omega, as I mentioned, Omega, and apparently the Doctor has battled him before, although we haven't talked about that. Or we haven't talked about that particular story on The Secrets of Doctor Who. So who is Omega?
Omega is one of the founders of Time Lord Society. He was a stellar engineer that caused a supernova to become a black hole that then is somehow related to the Eye of Harmony and may be the Eye of Harmony that powers Time Lord time travel technology. When his experiment was successful, he was trapped in an antimatter equivalent of our universe, and he used his mental powers to be able to create some artificial construct monsters. He made an attempt to get back into our universe in the 10th anniversary episode, which was the first multi-Doctor episode. It was called The Three Doctors. It had the first, the second, and the third Doctors. And he was a threat to the Time Lords then, and so the Time Lords pulled together the 3 different incarnations of the Doctor, and together they defeated Omega.
Okay. And we heard about him again in the 7th Doctor story we did, where there was like a weapon that related to
the
Omega.
Hand of Omega, yeah, right. which was capable of also destroying a star that the 7th Doctor used to destroy the star that Skaro orbits, he thought. Also, more recently in The Timeless Children, we got a glimpse of Omega, though he wasn't named. There's a moment in the script where we're having a flashback to Gallifrey, and in the script, Chris Chibnall says that the three figures we see, Tecteun and two men, may be presumed to be the three founders of Time Lord Society, meaning Tecteun, Rassilon, and Omega.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, I remember that now. Yeah, so a big figure, and so he gets this sort of a starring role here, although your mileage may vary, but I didn't feel like he came across as, as powerful as all that. Like not even like the Master. Like I didn't feel like.
They keep his identity secret for like 3/4 of this. So even though we're seeing him, he's in a new costume with a new headdress. He looks nothing like his previous appearance. And so I think that kind of underwhelms what he could be to this if they had exposed his identity earlier. And that kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier about being underwhelmed by Amsterdam, because it just looks like they're running through the streets of another European city. They don't focus on the canals, and it's not all that exotic. I think like Spain, when they went to Spain in the Sixth Doctor's time, I thought that was a more effective use of Spain than this was of Holland.
Yeah, Spain felt a lot more foreign to England.
It's interesting because you talk about the canals, and Britain has a lot of canals. And some of the downtown Britain, some of the cities in Britain have these canals running right through downtown and look exactly like that. In fact, there was one scene where, I don't know if they had reversed the film or something, but it actually looked like they were in Britain because the road signs were on the other side, on the right-hand drive side of the road. Instead, but it might have been, of course, they literally filmed. They used film when they were producing this, and so it might have got reversed, or it might have been a reshoot actually in Britain this looks close enough, let's use it type of deal.
Right.
In fact, we've even seen British canals on Doctor Who before, like in the scene which they were to use in Shada and did use in The Five Doctors. Mm-hmm. You've got Tom Baker and Lalla Ward punting down a canal in Oxford.
That's right. That's right.
It would have been better. I think part of the problem with this is it would have been better if they had gone out into the countryside in Holland instead of keeping us smack dab in the middle of a city center where everything looks, okay, this is standard European architecture.
Yeah, including Schiphol Airport, which, looked like it could have been the front door of any airport in any country in the world. I mean, it could have been something they filmed here in the United States at that time.
Right. And they spent most of the time in Amsterdam running about. That was just basically what it was. It was the running through streets. So
actually, there was less of that than I remembered. They do have a bunch of stuff happening earlier that involves moving from one place to another. But the thing that I remembered being particularly painful was in actually just like the last 10 minutes or so of the serial, where they are literally running through the streets of Amsterdam and chasing each other. And okay, that went on for a little long, but it wasn't as bad as I remembered.
It seems longer when the first time you watch it.
So I'm almost surprised there's not something on YouTube where it's sped up and put to the Benny Hill theme. I mean, it just kind of felt like that.
Man, there are videos on YouTube of Tom Cruise running everywhere because Tom Cruise always runs. We could do the same thing with the Doctor running, just all shots of a supercut of the Doctor running. So there's also the mention of the Matrix, which we've heard several times in New Who. It's come up. I don't think I remember it having seen anything like what we saw in this one, where the Lord President is the only one who really can access the Matrix and that sort of thing. So what again is the Matrix? Just remind me.
The Matrix is a database on Gallifrey that's composed out of the memories of all the Time Lords, and it's often portrayed as a virtual environment. It comes up in many of the episodes where the Doctor visits Gallifrey. It first appeared in Tom Baker's time, and it was established at that point that the president of Gallifrey had special access to it. In this episode, that's relevant because apparently Gallifrey has HIPAA privacy laws. You cannot transmit the biosignature of a Time Lord unless you're on the High Council, and really only the president has direct access to it through a kind of levitating crown special effect thing.
Yeah.
Also, there's just a lot of Time Lord technobabble in this episode that
There
doesn't
is.
make a lot of sense. It's like, oh, if we combine... So they also established the title of the episode, The Arc of Infinity, is a region of space that has a special magnetic anomaly from a collapsed Q star that allows access to the antimatter dimension. And somehow, if Omega, who they think is just an antimatter creature, they don't know it's Omega at first, if he's able to cross over using the Arc of Infinity and get control of the Matrix, it's like unlimited power, and they don't really explain how.
Yeah.
Just technobabble.
There's a lot of that, of a lot of talk about things and without explaining that. Just you just got to turn your brain off and go with the flow otherwise, because there's a lot of that babble.
Well, it's funny too that crown that the Lord President uses for the Matrix, we see later this season in the 10th Doctor or the 5 Doctors as the crown that he's wearing as he comes in at the end and everything, and it's just like, okay, we're using props, got it, because it's not for the same purpose. It's still the Lord President, but it's not the same purpose,
Right. So another thing that's notable about this episode is one of the guest stars, one of the Time Lord, citizens, is Colin Baker, who will, in 18 months from this point, or this airs, will become the 6th Doctor. 18 months or 24 months or something like that. Will become the 6th Doctor. But in this case, he's playing Commander Maxwell, who's head of security or something along those lines. I gotta say, I don't know if they modeled the writing for the 6th Doctor off of this character, but he's the same kind of jerk that the 6th Doctor is.
Except here it works because he's playing a bad guy, not the hero.
Quasi bad guy.
Quasi
very strict security guy is probably a good way to put him.
I mean, he wants to kill the Doctor, so that de facto makes him a bad guy. But
we could just headcanon it. That's really the 6th Doctor, wanting to mess with his earlier regeneration.
That's true. That would be weird.
This does, though, prefigure a situation that showed up later on the show where Peter Capaldi had played a couple of roles on Doctor Who and then went on to be cast as the Doctor. And at that time, they even addressed the question, why this face? And so you can headcanon something similar was happening when the 5th Doctor regenerated into the 6th. And somehow the role that Commander Maxwell played in this plot may have influenced his choice of regeneration. Subconsciously.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what would, but yes, we'll have to just headcanon that.
One, there's an interesting note on the Tardius Wiki page on this episode, which is that Colin Baker, who's at the time now, I think he's mellowed and he's become he certainly comes across in more recent interviews as a very sweet person. But at the time, his acting style was very loud and boisterous and kind of peppery. And that's all on display here. And there's a note on the page for this episode that says he was playing this as if he was the main character.
Right.
And John Nathan Turner had to go to him and say, this show is called Doctor Who, not the bloke in the background that's a security guard.
That's funny.
But he does, and Colin Baker will talk about how he gets to shoot his predecessor.
Yes.
And connect that somehow in his mind to succeeding him in the role.
A couple of interesting casting notes. So Patrick Stewart was considered for the role of the Castellan, which would have been very interesting. And that would have been just a couple years before Next Generation.
By the way, the term Castellan refers to the guy who's the master of a castle.
Yes.
And so he's the guy, he's not the president, but he's apparently in charge of the Citadel on Gallifrey where all this takes place.
Right. Sort of the chief steward,
the Chamberlain.
Yes. The steward of Gondor, like Denethor, Lord of the Rings. And then Pierce Brosnan was considered for the role of Maxwell, which also would have been very interesting. I want to see that alternate version with Patrick Stewart and Pierce Brosnan. I just want to.
Pierce Brosnan would definitely probably play the character better. Oh,
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Also, take note of the hat that Maxwell has. He's got this red motorcycle helmet that has ostrich feathers on the top of it.
Yep.
And it's so tall that it kept, and he's tall enough that it kept bumping into doorways and stuff. And so for most of the episode, he has to just keep it under his arm, which he felt like he was carrying around a chicken.
Right. I did notice that he was carrying that thing around. So the plot of the story is that Omega needs the Doctor's bioscan for some reason. And the Doctor specifically?
Yeah, well, not the Doctor specifically necessarily. There's a conversation that they have at the beginning of episode 1 where a Time Lord figure who we only see in shadows is talking to Omega, who we do see, but it's a new costume. So we have these two unknown characters talking to each other. And Omega is saying, have you picked somebody? And the shadowed Time Lord says yes, and for various reasons, it's got to be the Doctor. And Omega is like, ooh, the Doctor, how ironic. And what he wants to do is biologically bond with the Doctor in a way that will allow him to live permanently in our universe by flipping his particles from being antimatter to matter particles. Why the Doctor is necessary for that, they never explain, but apparently so.
More of the babble, the techno-babble that doesn't get explained.
And more the excuse why the Doctor had to be recalled to Gallifrey and all that.
Right. And as I said, the Time Lord Council, the High Council, decides that the only way to do this, to fix this, is to kill the Doctor so that he can't be copied, so that he can't be merged.
So Omega has already partially bonded with the Doctor, and that they say, therefore, that his crossover into our universe is imminent. It could happen at any time. And in view of the short amount of time, given the partial bonding, the only solution they see is to kill the Doctor to sever the connection.
Right. Okay. That seems extreme, but
yeah, it kind of is. And then, also, none of the people I'm going, okay, you keep talking about the urgency of the situation. Guys, you are a time-traveling civilization. Think four-dimensionally.
Right. And for some reason, Amsterdam is key to this whole thing. Like that location is where the Omega is coming through to our dimension for some reason.
And that's just random.
It's just of all the universe. Nice. So that's really the heart of the plot. There's a lot of running around, and the Doctor is killed, but not really, and that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of that, but that's really the heart of the story. So I wanted to talk more about some of the characters that we see. So we have a Time Lord that's the Doctor's friend, Damon. He's a technician. He's one of the ones who notices that in the beginning, the Doctor's bioscan being downloaded. His co-worker gets executed by the traitorous High Counselor that we'll find out the identity of in a second. So Damon, he works with the Doctor as a sort of treason against the orders of the High Council, which is very interesting. It's interesting to me because not having seen a lot of these classic episodes, I haven't seen a lot of Time Lords who are friends of the Doctor, which is kind of interesting to see to me.
Yeah, typically whenever he shows up on Gallifrey, there's some Time Lord friend from his past. Mm-hmm. In fact, when Tom Baker first goes to Gallifrey, where we get our first episode that's set entirely on Gallifrey, he meets Cardinal Barusa, who was like his mentor. Mm-hmm. And here in this episode, Barusa has regenerated and he's now the High President, but he's like an old friend of the Doctor's.
Yep. Okay. And then the other friend of the Doctor, who turns out not to be so, is Counselor Headen, which interesting. He's played by I had the thing. Played by Headen is Michael Gough. Gough, of course, that's the way it should be. But I've seen him in a lot of things. He's one of those characters who's been in a lot of things. But he was previously in Doctor Who in the Nightmare Fair as the Toy Maker. Actually, is that no? He would have been, but he did. Yeah. But he was previously the Celestial Toy Maker in a previous episode,
in the first
right?
Doctor's time. Yeah.
Okay. And had also been married, by the way, to Annika Wills, who played Polly in the first Doctor's time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, second Doctor.
Okay,
but
second,
starting in the first Doctor.
Right. He also played Alfred in the original Batman movies, that's where I recognized him from. But anyway, Headen is the traitor. He's the one who's working with Omega to bring him into our galaxy, into our universe, or our dimension. And his motivation, he kind of reveals at the end, is, Omega is one of our leading lights. He is one of our founders, and therefore he deserves to be brought back.
He also, his motive, is, even though he's been doing villainous things, including killing people, like Talon's, Talon was the name of the guy that got killed.
Right.
His motive is not purely villainous. It's like Omega has been treated unjustly by our society. We should not have abandoned him in the antimatter universe. He needs to come back and, take his rightful place and be accepted in our society and so forth. And Omega himself doesn't seem to have a terrible motive. Mm-hmm. When we get the final confrontation with Omega, which is in Amsterdam, and he's gotten his body temporarily turned into matter, but that's undoing itself. And now, in a way that doesn't make any sense given what antimatter is.
Right.
But it's undoing itself, and he's going to go boom if he's not stopped. But he explains to the Doctor why he wants to come back instead of just living in the antimatter universe where he's all alone and has only his own mentally created bad version of a holodeck to entertain himself.
Yeah.
And he says, time to come home, Doctor, time for rest, time to find peace. So that's his motive too. So it's interesting we get some complexity to the villains that we often don't get.
Right. He's not just a bad guy. Obviously, in order to do this, they're kind of sacrificing the Doctor. Although the original plan, Omega's plan, would not have killed the Doctor, would it? I mean, would it have replaced the Doctor?
I think we're meant to understand that the Doctor's body would have been taken over permanently. When Omega finally does cross over, there's an explosion, and it doesn't go quite right, but he's been, up to this point, he's been getting ready for the crossover. He's been melting, maple syrup is just dripping off of his costume. And then when the crossover happens, there's this big explosion that somehow drops lots of red sawdust on the interior of his TARDIS control room. And then when he takes off his helmet, it's Peter Davison. And so he looks like Peter Davison. He starts going around the streets of Amsterdam. And this is where we first start to see him as something more than just a villain, because he comes across this calliope that's entertaining a bunch of children and their parents. And one of the little kids looks up at him and he smiles back. And he smiles at the calliope, and he's being entertained by the calliope. And there's no dialogue in any of this, but they communicate that he is capable of friendship and compassion and happiness. Apparently, this scene is modeled off of something in Bride of Frankenstein, a similar scene.
Right.
But he does come across as more than just a villain. On the other hand, he is totally scorched earth. If he can't come back permanently, he wants to take a big chunk of the universe with him when he flips back to antimatter.
Right.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's a little selfish.
I got the impression too he would be like a ganger, going back to those episodes, the New Who with the gangers, where it would be the Doctor would still be alive, although he would be separated from his body in the Matrix, but the body still needed to exist as a template or something like that. And that's
right.
all, so it's something like that's why the Doctor couldn't actually be exterminated by the Time Lords.
He had to be kept alive. Yeah, and there was a little bit of time where he was hanging around, floating in the Matrix. So then there was Nyssa, who, for much of the story, is apparently the Doctor's only companion. She starts off, her and the Doctor. They'd left Tegan behind at Heathrow at the end of the last season. They
unintentionally.
Unintentionally. They thought she was back home and wanted to go back to work. And Tegan was like, where'd you go? So they're off on their own. I'm curious that some period of time will have passed for at least Tegan from her point of view. But Nyssa, yeah.
I was going to say, Tegan had enough time where she got back to her job and then got fired. We know that.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. How what she got fired for? It's interesting. But we'll talk about Tegan in a second. But Nyssa, she's very aggressive in her defense of the Doctor.
So there's a reason for that. Now, in the first place, Nyssa is Peter Davison's favorite companion. He thinks that she's the one that best fits his Doctor. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure he was really pleased to be able to play most of this with just Nyssa on hand. Mm-hmm. And also that fact that they've been traveling for some period with just the two of them gives us a great place to shove into continuity all those Big Finish stories that are just the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa.
Right.
Nice.
But originally, Leela was going to be in this episode because Leela ends up on Gallifrey. She gets married to a guy named Andred, and so she's on Gallifrey, and they even mention her in this episode where the Doctor asks his friend, how's Leela doing? And he says she's fine, and he says, I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to attend her wedding. Maybe I can see her while we're here. Well, originally they were going to have Leela in this episode, but Louise Jameson, the actress who plays her, turned out to be unavailable. And so they transferred Leela's plot points to Nyssa, which is why Nyssa is suddenly a gun-wielding maniac defending the Doctor. Normally that role would fall to Leela, and it would typically be knives, but who knows, she may have learned to use guns better since she's moving to Gallifrey.
Okay, that explains a lot. Yeah, because Nyssa was, she was much more. I mean, Nyssa tends to be not very emotional about things, but she was quite, for her, emotional in this episode. I mean, at one point she was even crying when she thought the Doctor was dead. So it was interesting to see, and so that explains it.
I did like this portrayal of Nyssa, though.
Oh yeah. She takes charge and she goes to town in this. I did like Nyssa in this. And then we get to Tegan and her cousin and his backpacking friend. So her cousin, I forgot to write his name down, but
Robin,
right? Her cousin and the backpacker friend Colin, which is easy to remember. They're in Amsterdam now, backpacking around. Robin is from Australia. Colin sounded British, and now I think it's important for our audience in 2021 to remember what it was like in 1983 to backpack around Europe. No cell phones, no internet. Some of these things where they're trying to find places or get a hold of people, they're using cell phones, they're running from place to place.
They're using phone booths.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the phone books in the phone booths, that all that stuff, that would be very different today. You'd have a whole different sensibility. You'd have your cell phone on you, you'd call people, you'd look things up. So it was very interesting to look at that from a 2021 point of view. But
by the way, I think you got it reversed. Colin is the cousin of Tegan.
Oh,
and Robin is the friend that's helping Tegan.
Yes,
find
that's
Colin.
right. That's right.
Right. Colin ends up getting they decide to they can't get in the hostel to stay, so they decide to camp out in a crypt on this old estate, which is typical.
Well, it's a crypt that's then connected to one of the pump houses to keep Amsterdam from flooding.
Right. Which
They actually are sleeping in the pump house, but it's like right next door to the crypt. Why they would do that, who knows?
And they don't say it, but that's also part of why Omega chose here, because he's going to attach a Time Lord converter thing to the water pipe to extract hydrogen atoms for fusion energy to make his transference. Although why you wouldn't go directly to the ocean, I don't know.
Right.
Or any other building that has water pipes.
Yeah, right. Colin is suitably creeped out by camping, outside the door to a crypt. I would be too. And then in the middle of the night, he gets woken up and ends up being zombified by
they call it an ergon, but what it is a skeletal pteranodon man. And it shoots him with a gun that makes him appear to disintegrate.
Yeah.
But this is a fake out. He's not actually dead. This gun is just a transporter. And it apparently transports people inside Omega's TARDIS. And then if he wants, he can zombify you in his TARDIS. But later, Robin and Tegan get shot with it too, and they're just inside the TARDIS. They don't get zombified.
Right. And Omega recognizes at some point he figures out that Tegan is a former companion of the Doctor and uses her against, to make the Doctor do what he wants. So there's that element there. What do you think of Tegan's role in this episode? I mean, did she acquit herself well in this? I mean, is the character effective in the plot?
Father?
Well, it's funny because I think she does something we see later companions do, that when they're separated from the Doctor, they kind of take charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that's part of the reason why Tegan is a liked character, even though she can be very annoying. She's willing to take charge. She's willing to get out there and, okay, let's solve this. Let's find out what's going on.
Okay.
In fact, from her first episode with the Fifth Doctor, he analyzes her and says she's a competent coordinator. And so I like the fact that she takes charge. I had the same thought Father did, that, she's doing the companion thing post-Doctor. She's being a little mini Doctor of her own. We're going to solve this mystery.
Right. And I suppose it would be logical to stem from the fact that as a flight attendant, stewardess at the time, she would have been trained to take charge and to be in command of, in emergency situations.
Which is the real job of flight attendants. It is not serving drinks and greeting people. It is to be there if there is an emergency.
Exactly. Right. Went on retreat a couple weeks ago, and that was one of the flights. The pilot actually said, the flight attendants will be coming around, and by the way, their primary job, though, is your safety, not getting you drinks. So
right. They're not waitresses in the sky. So, all right. So, anything else we should say about this episode? It's a fairly straightforward, and what do you think of it as a whole, the episode? Father Cory?
It was okay. I mean, I know we've talked about it before, but it seems like every time they go to Gallifrey gets more and more washed down and just kind of meh. And it's just kind of a meh. They went to Gallifrey episode.
Yeah. Jimmy?
I thought it was better than I remembered, and I like seeing Gallifrey.
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't like is how unreasonable the Time Lords come across. Mm-hmm. They are almost, not every time we see them, but almost every time we see them, they come across as unreasonable. And I understand that they need to come across as unreasonable up to a certain point to justify why the Doctor left Gallifrey for the audience. But they don't need to just be villains or almost villains. I do like how, after a bunch of the mystery, I mean, the people who have been in the audience's mind the least unsympathetic. Oh, by the way, I also think it's ironic that the High Council of Gallifrey is like 4 people and the President. But I like how we've been led to think that the Castellan and Commander Maxwell are the real bad guys here. Mm-hmm. But then once the Castellan sends Maxwell to investigate some stuff, Maxwell turns up evidence. No, the Doctor's been telling the truth. And their attitudes start shifting. And so they're portrayed as characters who are not unrelentingly single-mindedly against the Doctor. They're actually more open-minded than that. They've just got off on a wrong foot. And I like that. Overall, I would have made significant structural changes to all of this, but it's better than I remember. One thing I kind of don't like is, to up the drama, they will do things on the level of dialogue that'll be like, oh, this has almost never happened before in the entire history of Gallifrey.
Yeah.
Like the emergency recall circuit has only, to bring back a TARDIS, has only been used twice in our history. It's like, then why did you invent it? Right. And then we're told, capital punishment has been abolished, but there's one time before a Time Lord has been destroyed. And that's meant to, that presumably line was in there to cover the fact that Morbius had been destroyed, or so they thought, which will be coming up on a Tom Baker episode called The Brain of Morbius, where we get to learn about that.
Mm-hmm.
But still, on the dialogue level, the juicing the drama by, oh, this is almost unprecedented, it doesn't really do it for me. Also, the helmets that a lot of the Time Lords are wearing, the 2-horse jewel rhinoceros horn helmets, don't quite do it for me. It looks like they're trying to be a Jadoon or something with these little spiky jewel horns, 2 of them.
Yeah.
I like the big weird collars better than that. Also, let me see. Oh, yes. There's an episode, or there's a scene early in the first episode where Nyssa and Nyssa and the Doctor are fixing the audio on their scanner. Yep. And we get to see the equipment inside one of the roundels, which here is like an access panel. Yep. And then the Doctor is happy to have that done. And Nyssa says, hey, there's lots of other stuff we need to fix.
Yeah.
and like the fact that the TARDIS is supposed to be in a state of temporal grace. You said so. That's a reference to earlier where the Doctor had said guns wouldn't work in the TARDIS because it's in a state of temporal grace. But in the episode where Adric dies, Earthshock, Cybermen are firing off guns, and the Doctor fires off a gun in the TARDIS. And so this led fans to wonder, what about the state of temporal grace you said the TARDIS was in? And the Doctor dodges the question.
Right.
And so this is their way of handling that at the moment. They're kind of hanging a lantern on the thing and suggesting that the temporal grace circuit or whatever has become broken. Now, we're going to get another twist on that when we go back to do our next New Who episode, Let's Kill Hitler, because Melody Pond is going to shoot the TARDIS and from on the inside, and it's going to have consequences. And the Doctor is like, why did you shoot my TARDIS? And she, having heard all about the TARDIS growing up with Amy Pond, is going to say, I was told it was in a state of temporal grace. And the 10th Doctor is going to say, that was a clever lie. Anyone could see that was a clever lie.
Yes, that would be good. I do like that Nyssa had a honeydew list for the Doctor, though. That's good.
Well, I get a kick. You mentioned repairing the audio circuit, and did you happen to notice that it just happened to look like an early portable cassette deck? You could even see like the flap on the back, the door on the back for the batteries.
Oh, that's good.
But it was like he was holding it backwards. You could see the buttons on the top, and then the little door on the back for the batteries. So that's what the audio circuit is. It's an old cassette deck.
Nice. So my thoughts, I thought a lot of this episode was, especially the first two episodes, were way too jumpy from scene to scene, back and forth from one thing to the next. I found it distracting how much it moved from one thing to the other. I kind of wanted them to, and I think that contributed to a bit of confusion about what's going on. So I thought that could have been better.
Yeah, the note that occurred to me at that point is if you're not already deep in this lore, some of this is not going to come across clearly to you because they're not stopping to explain things.
Yep. I did figure out Headen was the traitor early on because he was way too much of a chum to the Doctor. It's just the way writers think, and it was clearly he was going to be the bad guy. So that was interesting. It wasn't going to be any of the obvious villains, quote unquote, and it wasn't a woman's voice, so it wasn't the woman High Counselor. So therefore, Thalia, yeah,
named after the Greek muse of comedy.
Nice. Although she wasn't very funny.
No, she was pretty serious and quite a techie herself. She's all over, how technology works.
That's right. Well, the time ladies, they know stuff. All right, I think that about does it for my notes. Do you have anything else we want to say about this episode? I think that's about it. So we'd love to hear from you, but first I do want to make sure before I forget. I want to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Leonidas S., Frederick H., Megan S., Neil P., and Rhonda M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. Now's a great time to become a StarQuest patron, thanks to a generous gift from a StarQuest supporter. When you start a new Patreon monthly pledge at sqpn.com/give, the first 3 months will be matched by an equal amount from our donor to support all our shows, including this one, which makes your gift go even further. And we're more than halfway to our goal of $2,000 in new monthly pledges. So won't you help us close the gap? If you've been thinking of becoming a StarQuest patron, now's the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So we want to hear from you. What do you think of Arc of Infinity, this story? Did you like it? Did you have other comments? We'd love to hear your feedback by commenting at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And as Jimmy said, we'll be back next time discussing the 11th Doctor story, Let's Kill Hitler. Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
Father Cory Stiga, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, it's the biggest explosion this part of the universe is ever likely to witness.
Right. This is going to be fun.